Well, it's 2 Nephi chapter 24 today. We'll finish the last of the Isaiah chapters in the writings of Nephi, and this ties into Isaiah chapter 14. In the previous chapter, just to kind of set the stage, we talked about the destruction of Babylon as a type of the destruction of the second coming. And as we go into chapter 24, it's talking about that post-Babylonian destruction. And in our day, this Isaiah chapter has two parallels. It has an ancient parallel and an ancient and a modern parallel. And we're going to take the king of Babylon, who was probably Belshazzar. Babylon had several monarchs, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar. Belshazzar is probably the one we're talking about, because this is talking at the time when Babylon is conquered by the Persians, and he was the Babylonian monarch at that time. Really arrogant and brutal and cruel ruler. And you can see, as we look at this from that point of view, he's going to compare the Babylonian monarch with the devil and Lucifer. If you look at chapter 24, Israel shall be gathered and shall enjoy millennial rest. Lucifer cast out of heaven for rebellion. Israel shall triumph over Babylon or the world. So we just run a kind of a little comparison here as we look at these two things, because otherwise it seems like we go from the Babylonian monarch and we jump to Lucifer. And you ask the question, why is that big leap? Well, in reality, what they're doing is they're comparing the fate of Lucifer at the end of the world with the fate of this monarch at the end of the Babylonian reign and the beginning of the Persian reign. And so what Isaiah does is he draws these parallels, and it's really pretty interesting what he does there. Let's go to verse 1. Sister Stroud, verse 1.
The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos...
Where are you at?
Oh.
Chapter 24.
Well, okay, let me try that one then. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob.
Okay, if we take an ancient time, what happened is after the Babylonian captivity, they took the Jewish people. The 10 tribes are already gone in a previous captivity with Assyria. And in 586 BC, the Babylonians come down and conquer Jerusalem. This is the time of Lehi. And carry those that are not killed, carry them away captivity. And so they're carried away. And what verse 1 is saying is that the Lord's going to have mercy and restore them again. And actually their captivity lasted for 70 years. So after the Babylonians came down and destroyed Judah, and those that survived were carried away, there was a 70-year period of Babylonian captivity. And then at that time, Cyrus the Great comes in and destroys the Babylonian Empire and sets them, look what it says, sets them in their own land. So Isaiah is saying, even though you're in trouble here, even though you're captive, the Lord will have mercy on you, and you will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, which is exactly what happened in 70 years after the captivity. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave unto the house of Jacob. The strangers in those days were any people that, when they went back down to Jerusalem, anybody that wanted to join them as proselytes or converts and go down, anybody that wanted to be a Jew was allowed to go down there and partake of their religion and partake of building the temple, rebuilding the temple, and so on. In our day, the strangers, another word for stranger is foreigner, another word for foreigner is Gentile. So it has a multiple meaning here, and in our day, when the house of Israel receives the gospel again and restored to the knowledge of the Lord, a small group of surviving Gentiles that aren't wiped out, I mean a really small group of surviving Gentiles, will have an inheritance with the restored house of Israel in our future day. They'll be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. So adopted Gentiles or foreigners in our day. Let's go on down to verse 2. Sister Millette?
And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, yea, from far unto the ends of the earth. And they shall return to their lands of promise. And the house of Israel shall possess them. And the land of the Lord shall be for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives unto whom they were captives. And they shall rule over their oppressors.
So let's take the ancient application. First of all, the people shall take them. The people we're talking about are the Persians under Cyrus the Great. Take them are the captive Jews from far unto the ends of the earth, and they shall return to the lands of their promise, which they did in 70 years after that. And the house of Israel shall possess their ancient lands, as they did. And the land of the Lord, meaning the ancient inherited lands that's been empty now for 70 years, shall be for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captive. And the ancient texts say that was captive not by force, but by persuasion. And so there were people that they persuaded to go down there. They needed to have a number of people to go down there and help them build up the place. One of the problems is that 70 years later, when Cyrus allowed the captive Jews to go down there, the majority of them didn't want to go back. That Cyrus had treated them so well after their Babylonian imprisonment and after the brutality of Belshazzar that they just wanted to stay there. They were in a nice environment. They were in a very civilized world. They were treated well. They were allowed to have businesses. They were allowed to worship according to their own religion. And so Cyrus was really quite a monarch that everybody loved and treated them well, and so the majority did not want to go back. Well, they needed to go back. They needed to have a certain number of people to go down there and re-inhabit the area and build the temple. And so what they did is they persuaded others to go with them and join with them in that enterprise. And that's the captives, the servants, the handmaids, unto whom they were captive. They shall rule over their oppressors. Now, in our day, we're talking about up there, the people shall take them and bring them. The people in our day are the modern Gentiles. And the Book of Mormon talks a lot about that the Gentiles would be nursing mothers and fathers and carry them on their arms and on their shoulders and help them reestablish their ancient homelands and come to a knowledge of the Lord. The Gentiles in our day are us, the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And to restore them, we take their ancient record, the Book of Mormon, and we restore it to the remnants of Israel in our day. And it's through the instrumentality of the Gentiles that Israel's restored to a knowledge of their Savior. And eventually, if you go down there, it says, in the middle of that, it says, they shall return to their lands of promise. That is post or after the New Jerusalem period. All of these tribes of Israel, except Judah, prior to the second coming, are going to gather to the New Jerusalem. There they're going to receive all the priesthood ordinances, all the blessings and sealings that they need under the hands of Ephraim. After that time, then they will go to their ancient homelands that we now call the Middle East, and they'll be restored to their ancient lands of promise. All of North and South America during the millennium is the land of inheritance for the seed of Joseph. All of the other tribes of Israel will receive their ancient homelands in the Middle East, in and around Jerusalem. So they'll be restored to those ancient lands. Let's go up to verse 3, Brother Steve.
And it shall come to pass that in that day that the Lord shall give thee rest for thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve.
Okay, again, double meaning. Let's go over to section 103 in the Doctrine and Covenants, where it talks about the hard bondage wherein they were called to serve. Section 103 is a interesting little section that gives us some insight on something that I think is really important here. Section 103, and we want to go to let's go to verse 11. Verily I say unto you, I have decreed that your brethren which have been scattered shall return to the lands of their inheritances, and shall build up the waste places of Zion. After much tribulation, I'll go back there and look at the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. All right. After much tribulation I have said unto you in a former commandment, cometh the blessings. Behold, this is the blessing which I have promised after your tribulations, hard bondage, and after the tribulations of your brethren, your redemption and the redemption of your brethren, even to the restoration to the land of Zion, to the establishing no more to be thrown down. Now skip on down to verse 15. Behold, I say unto you, the redemption of Zion must needs come by power. It's not going to be something man-made. It's going to come by power. Therefore I will raise up unto my people a man who shall lead them like as Moses led in the children of Israel. This is a future day for us. This hasn't happened yet. For ye are the children of Israel and the seed of Abraham, and ye must needs be, look at this, led out of bondage by power with a stretched out arm. Now this is a comparison back to the Egyptian children of Israel. But look at your footnote down under 17c. What does it say down there?
Bondage, physical.
Physical bondage, not spiritual, physical bondage. So it appears at some time that the people of the church, the remnant of Israel, etc., are going to experience a physical bondage. They're going to lose liberties. I see in 2012 we're on the verge of that. I can see that coming. And then look what he says, verse 18. As your fathers, think of Moses and the house of Israel, were led out at first, and think how they came out of Egypt by miracles, right? 10 plagues followed by the parting of the Red Sea. So shall be the redemption of Zion. So there's another thing. You want to see what is going to happen in a future day when the Lord delivers modern Israel? Look back in the Exodus and see what he did to deliver ancient Israel. This is what we're doing a lot of in Isaiah here. We're looking what happened anciently in Babylon and Persia and Assyria to see what we can expect in our day. That's the way that works. Now look at these next verses. Verse 19. Therefore let not your hearts faint. That seems to indicate that it's going to be serious. It's going to be, the word over here in Isaiah that's used a lot is tremble. Is used a lot. The Hebrew word for fear should be translated trembling. And then it says, for as I said unto your fathers, Moses and the ancient, mine angel shall go up before you, but not my presence. And there was an angel that guided the people, the children of Israel. It was called the angel of the Lord's presence, and there's all indications that that was Enoch. And that Enoch was here fulfilling another mission as the angel of the Lord's presence. Now look at our day. That was anciently in verse 19. But now here's our day. But I say unto you, mine angel shall go up before you, and also my presence. And in time ye shall possess the goodly land. So whereas an angel went before the house of Israel before, that same angel will go before us along with the presence of the Lord. His presence wasn't there anciently, but in our day, the presence of Jehovah is going to be there. So, an interesting days that we're looking at coming into. Any questions or comments on that? Let's go back to Hebrew. Let's go back to 2 Nephi 23. And that makes sense now when it comes out. It says, the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, from thy fear, verse 3, and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. Anciently and in our day. In our day, we're going to go into some hard bondage. Okay? And another place we looked at in Isaiah, we're delivered from that bondage after a period of time because of the anointing. So special covenants made in special places will give the power to deliver modern Israel in the days that are coming. Verse 4. It shall come to pass in that day that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, and the golden city ceased? What they're saying there is that the collapse of Babylon is going to be so utter and so quickly and so total that most people will stand off and look and say, how did that happen? This was the greatest nation of the world, and it just overnight was gone. Now the same thing's going to happen in our day with Babylon in the latter days, and John the Revelator talked about that. And John said the modern Babylon, which is the world, will go down in an hour and a day. So here you have these two parallels now, and both of them are miraculous. Both of them take place miraculously. Verse 5, Sister Stroud.
The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepters of the rulers.
Now it's talking about the fall of Babylon again. A scepter is a sign of a monarch's absolute power. And when it says it's broken the staff and the scepters of the rulers, that means that those who now were undefeatable are just totally gone.
Cleansing of the earth.
We're going to look at that in our day. We see the building of something called a New World Order. That's a global order of satanic conspiracy, and it literally is involved in every aspect of our lives. It's been in the building for 6,000 years since Cain had limited success, but in our day it's complete. And so we're seeing, with the restoration of the gospel, we're also seeing the completion of a satanic world order. When it goes down, it will be so dramatic that people will stand afar off with their mouths open and just gasp. How could this be? Those who made money at it, who merchandised, will howl and mourn at the loss of everything they've had that will happen overnight.
Just you go to bed one night, wake up the next day, and the whole world is...
It's a whole different deal. Now there will be slides and different things like that, but when this thing goes down, it's going to go down completely. And it'll only go down because the Lord God of hosts takes it down.
We read a little bit about this in the book of Revelations, where those on ships would stand far off and watch it burn and cry about it, and all those fine things and trinkets would be lost forever. But they don't dare go near it. Again, I assume that's nuclear.
Could be. That's good thought.
And this other thing about it'll go down in an hour and a day. You can end a world within an hour using nuclear weapons, and you can cross an international date line, moving one day to the next that way also.
Oh, interesting thought. Good thought.
Yeah.
Good thought. Let's go to verse 6, Sister Stroud.
He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hindereth.
Okay. He who smote the people with wrath and a continual stroke is talking about the Babylonian king. And in our day, we're going to see that it's going to talk about Lucifer and his mortal minions. So two sides on this. In other words, the continual stroke means it was just unending. It was never ending. It was day and night, and the people could never rest. They could never escape the suppression, the oppression of this thing. Verse 7, Sister Millette.
The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing.
Because of the fall of Babylon anciently, and in our day, because of the fall of Babylon in the future.
It's interesting. In 6 it said that he that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted. So it's like the tables have turned on him, and nobody helps that guy out.
Nobody. In fact, when we get further, this mighty monarch of Babylon, when he goes into the spirit world, has some interesting things to say on how he's greeted in the spirit world, and how the dead look at him when this huge monarch that ruled the world comes amongst them. That's coming up.
Okay.
Verse 8, Brother Steve.
Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and also the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us.
Okay, fir trees and the cedars of Lebanon have reference to rulers, magistrates, judges, the high and the mighty of different nations. But when they say that since this has happened, since thou art laid down, okay, Babylonian king, no feller, what is that? What's a feller?
A logger.
Nobody that cuts these, nobody that can cut down a tree is come up against us. Because of that, in verse 7, everybody's at rest and is quiet and break forth in singing. So the oppression from this thing has ceased. See, what they did is that they exacted tributes from all of these little vassal states. So all of these nobles and these sub-kings that ruled all these other nations that were under Babylon, they had to pay tribute in the form of taxes. And sometimes the tax was so oppressive that it just killed them economically. It's like sharecropping, where you don't own the land, but you work it, and you give 50% of everything the land produces, and you keep half of it, and that's the way you subsist day in and day out. The Book of Mormon also gives us some ideas of people who are oppressed because of tribute paying or taxes, up to 50%. But we're pushing that in the United States right now. We're up into corporate taxes now that are up into 40+%. Verse 9, now we're going to go into the spirit world. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. Okay? So when this king of Babylon, this monarch that ruled the world, when he comes into hell, it catches notice. People who are there have heard about it, and they're waiting for him. It stirreth up the dead for thee. See, the word's out. People know that this monarch that ruled the world is coming. All the chief ones of the earth, former kings, magistrates, nobles, and great ones, it hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, here we go, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? What's the lesson we can learn from that? Take a king who had it all and goes into the spirit world. What's he got now? Nothing. And he's like what? Like the rest of us. And so here's this mighty Babylonian king, or an Assyrian king, or a Roman king, or a New World Order Obama king that had everything that comes in there, and now they have nothing. Okay? A lot of the people that meet him there are the ones he oppressed in this life. Think about that. So a lot of the dead kings that wait for him are the ones that were under his thumb and that were oppressed by him. So there's a double edge there, see. Verse 11, Sister Stroud.
Thy pomp is brought down to the grave. The noise of thy vials is heard. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee.
What do we get out of verse 11?
That he's just like it is. His body's rotting away in the grave. The worms are doing their job. All his, the noise of thy vials is not heard. That's music, right? He doesn't have any of that background thing going on. And no more splendor about him at all.
It's all gone. It's like the guy that says, well, you can't take it with you. But I've seen a guy that was buried in Los Angeles in a vintage Corvette. Okay, he had a vintage Corvette, and they put his corpse in a vintage Corvette behind the wheel in a concrete deal and buried him with his car, trying to take it with him. I got news for him. Verse 12, Sister Millette. Now look, we're going to shift gears. Go ahead.
How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations?
Now look at your footnote on 12a. The fallen king of Babylon is typified by the fallen son of the morning, Lucifer. See what we're doing? We're running. It's an interesting way that these prophets had of drawing parallels with what was going on in their day, with things that were further past from their day or things that were yet future in their day. And it was an interesting way of doing that. So you can look at everything that we've read thus far about the king of Babylon now and apply it directly into the desires, aspirations, goals, and plans that Lucifer had before he was cast out. Everything. Right on down the line. You could take everywhere where we put the king of Babylon and put Lucifer in that place, and it would have a parallel. It would fit right on down. Because basically their desires and aspirations are the same thing. Rule, control, subject, oppress with blood and horror, and turn slaves into all mankind to do as they bid. Verse 13, Brother Steve.
For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north.
That's an interesting thing. This is what Lucifer said in his heart, and it's also, in a degree, what any unrighteous king or monarch desires. Let's break it down. What does it mean when he says, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God?
It's going to go above anything and everything that God's created.
Okay.
He sees himself as being God himself.
What do the stars represent?
Glory.
Okay.
Glory, kingdom.
Isn't there a scripture somewhere in the Old Testament where it says that when the plan of the great Jehovah was presented, the morning stars shouted for glory and praise? So what we're looking at here is I will exalt my throne above not only the planets, which shows further up, but we can take it a step further and apply that to the noble and great sons and daughters who've proven themselves valiant, and even a step further, have achieved a degree of exaltation before they're born. In other words, he wants to be where? With them?
Above him.
Above them is the key word. Look at the next one. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. The Chaldean translation on that says, on the mount of the covenant, and on the sides of the north. I pondered that a lot, and I thought about why the north is used here and not east, south, and west. Huh?
In the sides on.
In the sides of the north, okay? You have any thoughts on that?
I'm wondering, you have the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and you have the tabernacle of the congregation. This is called the mount of the congregation. A mount would be higher because everything that has to do with temple or exaltation or exalted people is always on mount or mountain.
Okay, very good. I looked up the Hebrew for the word congregation, and the Hebrew comes out and says appointed place. The appointed place. So, and the other place says the Mount of the Covenant. And the thought I have on that is that on a map, when you take the degrees of the compass on a map, north is always up. You never go from north down. I mean, what I'm saying is you never talk about going north and going down.
Yeah.
North is always pointed up. South is always down. East is always to the right, and left is always to the, or west is always to the left.
Well,
Okay,
your
depending on
North
where you're
Star is
facing.
also your constant star. It's what you can always look to get your bearings. North Star. You don't have an East Star or West
I like
Star.
that one. That's a constant. Also interesting that Christ comes out of the east. So I wonder if the congregation and the sides of the north don't represent the highest degree of heaven, where the Father himself sits. Because we know from another place that Lucifer said, let's go to section 29 and see what it is that he wanted there. I think it's 29. Yes. Verse 36, it came to pass that Adam being tempted of the devil, for behold, the devil was before Adam, for he rebelled against me, the Father, saying, give me thine honor, which is thy power. And also a third part of the hosts of heaven turned he away because of their agency. They were thrust down and became the devil and his angels. There was a place prepared for them from the beginning, which place is hell. I just wonder if that north doesn't have reference to the highest heavens. It would be where the Father dwells.
I think there's something else about north too, because the 10 tribes will come out of the north, won't they?
Come out of the north, they do.
And he's going to set himself in the mount, or in the north.
In the sides of the north.
Also upon the mount of the congregation, 10 tribes.
Maybe there's a
in the
form.
sides of the mount.
Interesting also, in ancient Jerusalem at the time of Christ, Jerusalem is a series of hills. There's some hills there, okay? And the hill just north of the city of Jerusalem is called Mount Zion. And it's to the north of Jerusalem. So I'm wondering again if this doesn't have reference to the heavenly Zion, the place where the Father dwells. Sister Stroud.
If you read 14, it'll tell you, because there was just a semicolon there. And he's going to say, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds.
And look at the next part.
Yeah, and I will be like the Most High.
Who is that?
Heavenly Father.
That's the Father. 15, Sister Millette.
Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit.
Doesn't sound too good, does it? Let's look at the next one, Brother Steve.
They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and shall consider thee, and shall say, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms?
I looked up the word narrowly consider, and it's a squint. It's like this, you look at it and you go. In other words, another word for it is astonished. So it has two things. It has to squint and be astonished.
Disbelief, too.
And what are they?
Disbelief, like, what?
What's their astonishment about? Verse 60. What is it they're so astonished about? What is so surprising to them?
That they used to think this guy was everything, and he turns out to be nothing.
He ends up being what? What does it say he is?
Let's see.
This is the one that made the earth.
Brought down to hell.
What does it say? They will look at thee and shall consider thee and say what?
But anyway, they look at him and see that like he's nothing.
Well, there's your key. They say, is this, here's your key, the man?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That made the earth to tremble. That did shake the kingdom.
So what's the world view of the devil? How does the world view the devil? What's the devil described as?
At this point?
Yeah, in our day.
Well, how do you say the devil? I mean,
What's a Hollywood devil look like?
it looks like horns and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
All that garbage, and everybody buys that. So when you go out here and you stop anybody on the street out here and you say, describe the devil, describe Satan, they're going to describe something that's Hollywoodish.
He's red.
Yeah, red, half man, half beast.
Or the other way, he's incredibly handsome and I don't know what's the word
I bet
rich looking, but he might have 20 years.
Yeah. Most people are going to consider him frightening, supernatural, and basically what they're going to see is this the man, and look what he said, the man that made the earth to tremble and shook the nations. Now this is also applying symbolically to the Babylonian king, but specifically to Satan. They're one and the same. Let's look at verse 17, Sister Stroud.
And made the world as a wilderness, and destroys the cities thereof, and opened not the house of his prisoners.
Interesting that? See that?
From annihilation.
Wilderness is a very wicked place. That's always a metaphor for a very wicked place, and that's what the devil does. He makes the world a very wicked place and destroy the cities thereof.
If thou cursest me, I will take the treasures of the earth, and with gold and silver I will buy up armies and navies, false priests who oppress, tyrants who destroy, and reign with blood and horror on this earth. Now that's what he did. That's what he did. And I love what the Lord does. I love what the Father does. What does the Father do after the threat? Here's what the Father does. Depart. Depart. Off he goes. Shows who has the real power, doesn't it? He sits there and the Father just goes.
Like a fly.
Yeah, just go away.
Get away, kitty bother.
Now 18 is really interesting.
Mosquito. The real mosquito in
The real mosquito. The real vampire, actually. All the kings of the nations, yea, all of them lie in glory, every one of them in his own house. That's an interesting statement. But thou, Lucifer, watch, are cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch. Let's talk about that for a minute. What is Isaiah telling us there in those two verses? All of the kings of the nation lie in glory, every one of them in his own house. What does that mean?
Well, it means that he has power in his own place, but no place else.
Very good.
Number one.
Okay.
And then, but thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch.
Speaking to Lucifer.
Yeah. An abominable branch.
Cast out of thy grave. And you have to tie in. He's making a comparison with 18 with all other earthly mortal monarchs who've ever lived, that they die and they go into the spirit world.
Okay, so one thing could be that all the kings of the nations lie, yea, all of them lie in glory, every one of them in his own house. His own house is his own body. So every king on earth gets a resurrection, but not this guy, not Satan, because he was never given the power.
Exactly. That's exactly where we're going. Isn't that wonderful? Lie in his own house, meaning, exactly right, they're going to be resurrected. And they lie in glory, because even if they come out into a telestial world, they'll have glory that Satan never will have.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about in verse 19 is Lucifer being denied a body, a birth, a family, a death, and a resurrection. Thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch. I looked up the Hebrew on that, and the translation of it says, like a repugnant corpse, instead of an abominable branch. And the remnant of those that are slain thrust through with the sword, that go down to the stones of the pit as a carcass trodden under feet. That's describing him. All of those is describing Lucifer in his perdition state. Those are symbolic descriptions. You're trodden under like a carcass. You go down to the stones of the pit. You'll never resurrect. You'll never have a birth, never have a wife, never have a family. And that's basically what he's talking. Sister Millette, verse 20.
Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial.
With who? Who's the them?
The kings.
The kings in verse 18. That's right. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial. Go ahead.
Because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned.
What do you think it means, thou hast destroyed thy land? It means Lucifer's destroyed his own land. What do you think that's talking about?
His own future. I mean, land is something he passed on to further generations and things like that. So he basically, by rebelling against our Father and Christ, he basically damned himself to no future. He's without hope, like you said. I like that.
In the Book of Mormon, the word destroy, and in the Doctrine and Covenants, takes on a different meaning for me. It's one thing to lose your life spiritually and physically. It's another thing to lose your posterity and the potential for family life in eternity. The ultimate destruction, and I think the way that it's used in the Scriptures on a deeper level, is to cut yourself off from eternal posterity and to not belong to a family unit. And that certainly is him. Thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. See, in the deeper things, that's the seed he could have had. That's the wife he could have had. That's the posterity he could have had and didn't.
Yeah, it could go that way, and it's also those who followed him. He slain them. He by following him, then he promised them everything and gave them nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't have power to give them anything.
And it's interesting. And it's interesting that the very next thing, look what he says. The seed. What is the seed?
It's your future.
It's your children.
Yeah.
It's your children. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. And basically it's just a repeat. You're never going to have family. The ultimate curse. The ultimate destruction. Verse 21. Brother Steve?
Prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquities of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. Wow.
Okay, again we're talking about the curse that takes place here. Notice that it says that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. Do not rise again has reference to no resurrection, no progress after the resurrection, no eternal increase, and possess the land means the highest degree of the celestial world.
Or even any of the kingdoms.
Or any of the kingdoms. For him, yeah. For him, that's right. Verse 22, I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name, the remnant, the son, nephew, saith the Lord. What did you say? Now there's 2 points there. You've got Lucifer in one thing, and you've got the king of Babylon in another. It just fits in again. Notice what he says. I will cut off the name, the remnant, the son, and the nephew. Meaning what?
All posterity.
No posterity.
Yeah.
Everything cut off. It again refers back to the ultimate destruction of no family in the highest degree of the celestial world. Verse 23, Sister Stroud.
I will also make it a possession for the bittern, and the pools of water, and I will sweep it with the besom of destruction, saith the Lord of hosts.
A besom is a broom. And here he's talking about, again, it's kind of similar back to chapter 23, where we talked about in verse 20, after Babylon was destroyed, it will never be inhabited again. Remember that? The Arabian won't put his tent there. The wild beasts will be there, the dragons, the satyr, and all these other things. It's again a reference to that when it comes out. He says, I will make it a possession for the bittern, and pools of water I will sweep with the basin. Verse 24, Sister Millette.
The Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, Surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have proposed, so shall it stand.
Blank, 25, Steve.
That I will bring the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders.
Now here's an interesting thing. The Assyrian was before Babylon. Now we've just spent the whole chapter talking about Babylon and a little bit about Persia, and here Isaiah jumps back to an empire that predates both of them. But remember that the Assyrian is also future. And I think that the Assyrian, speaking in verse 25, is a power that will come out of the ancient lands of the Assyrian, which we know today is up in Iraq and Iran and those countries there. And I think when it says, then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders, I think that goes back all the way back to verse 3, when we're talking about it someday in the future, the people of the Lord will be made to serve with hard bondage and will seek for rest. I think this is tying into that kind of a thing. We don't hear about an attacking Babylonian in the latter days, but we do hear about an attacking Assyrian. And the Assyrian is a force to be reckoned with in a future day as a part of the worldwide tribulation that takes place before the second coming. But we don't hear of Babylon. We hear about a nation of Babylon, and we hear about a world of splendor and riches and whoredoms and so on. But the army that comes down and attacks is the Assyrian in the latter day. It is interesting. Verse 26, this is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all nations. In other words, this is what all this is happening about. It took place then, it'll happen again in the future. What's the purpose? For the Lord of hosts hath proposed, and who shall disannul? His hand is stretched out, and who shall turn back? In the year that King Ahaz died was this burden, message, that was given here. And you can look back and see when that happened. Verse 29, Sister Stroud.
Rejoice not thou, O Palestinian, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent.
Look at your footnote down on 29C. Jesus Christ, flying anticipation of, so this is looking forward, as reference to looking forward to the second coming. I'm not sure I understand a lot of what that's talking about. I think the rod of him that smote thee is broken. Goes up to verse 25 when it says, then shall his yoke depart from off them, and the burden lifted off their shoulders. I think those two are tying together. Let's go to verse 30, Sister Millette.
And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety. And I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. 31, Brother Steve.
Howl, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestinian art dissolved. For there shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed time.
The thing that comes from the north is the Assyrian horde again. Verse 32, and what shall then answer the messengers of the nations? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it. As a result of all of these things that are taking place in our day, Zion comes forth, is born out of tribulation. And once Zion's born out of tribulation, then we find peace and rest for the people after the day of tribulation. Any questions or comments on that?
No, just that we have one more in chapter 27, because it compares to Isaiah 29. I don't know if you want to do that.
Oh, do we? Chapter 27. Yeah, we'll have to do that in another one, won't we?
Yeah.
Now, just so that you'll know, chapter 25 now is an inspired commentary by Nephi on everything. 25 and 26 will give you a commentary on all of the chapters of Isaiah that we've just studied. So if you'll look at those with that in mind, saying, here's what Nephi is going to interpret all of these things we've looked at. He's going to give an inspired interpretation on that. Then that gets really more clean and more pure. Let me just ask you a question. As we've gone over the Isaiah prophecies, what benefit has come out of it for you? What have you gained from all of this that we've spent quite a bit of time on? Just share with you what your thoughts are.
There's a couple of them. One is now we don't have a fear of Isaiah anymore. Because before I started reading like one or two verses, I'm like, God, never mind. And I fast forward through it, so I don't have a fear of it anymore. Knowing that it took place in the past and also the future is of a benefit. And it shows that the things that are coming, you really don't have to fear because it's not forever. And it'll come out right in the end. Anyway.
Okay, very good.
So,
Millette, how about you? What is all this? Has this helped you in any way as we've gone over all of these things in Isaiah?
Some of them, not only, because sometimes I'm confused about the places like the Assyria, the Persia. They're not confusing, but I just know that, like the second coming, how it, like, I'm just imagining what will happen, like that.
Okay, very good. Sister Stroud, do you have any thoughts on Isaiah chapters before we wrap this up?
No.
You've studied them for years.
No, it really helped to go through them like this, verse by verse, with getting everybody's input. I thought that was good. I enjoyed that.
thanks, Steve.
Let's look at 2 Nephi 25, closing verse 7. In the first 6 verses, Nephi commands us to study Isaiah and gives us some keys on how to understand it. Verse 5, my soul delighteth in the words of Isaiah, see? Now verse 7 is what I'd like to look at. After reading these chapters off the brass plates, he says, I proceed with mine own prophecy according to mine plainness, in the which I know that no man can err. Nevertheless, in the days that the prophecies of Isaiah shall be fulfilled, men shall know of a surety at the times when they come to pass. Wherefore they are of worth unto the children of men, and he that supposes that they are not, unto them will I speak particularly, and confine the words unto mine own people, right here. For I know that they shall be of great worth unto them in the last days, and in that day shall they understand them. Wherefore, for their good, us, have I written these words here.
Yes, it's like, the second coming is like, you're reading about Isaiah, what he said and what his prophecy. So it's like you're preparing yourself on that time. So you can prepare. Oh, this is
Yeah, it's inside yourself also. And it's also a great word that this is us now. Yeah.
What kind of keys have you discovered through this study that's helped you and that you can use to help others understand Isaiah? What kind of skills or methods have you learned as we've studied this?
Don't take things so literal, but see what they're similar to.
Okay, very good.
And
you need more references, like just like that footnotes and other verses.
Footnotes and all that? Yeah. Very good.
And then also, as you read these things, and as you really ponder them, you try and keep the Spirit with you so that you can be taught things also. You can envision it as you read.
Very good. All right. Thank you.